The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the violent, brutal murders of Hollywood icon Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele, and the arrest of their own son, Nick. Here's the story. Every story has a beginning. Some have an end we never expect. Rob Reiner, the legendary filmmaker behind Stand By Me and When Harry Met Sally, spent decades bringing laughter, heart, and truth to audiences worldwide. A husband, father, and storyteller, he believed in the power of love and family, even when his own son battled addiction. But one December weekend in Brentwood, Los Angeles, that belief would meet a devastating turn. After a tense argument, Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele Singer Reiner, were found dead in their home. Authorities have arrested their son, Nick, and a community reels from a tragedy that no one saw coming. What happened during the final hours of the life of this Hollywood icon? This hour, we're going to take a close look at a lot of the issues and some of the newer developments in the investigation into the death of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele, a violent end that they met inside their own home, inside their own mansion out in Brentwood. Let's get to some of the facts here. We're going to bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who joins us tonight live in Los Angeles at the LA County Superior Courthouse. And we have new video, Cody, allegedly showing the arrest of Nick Reiner. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Vinny, that's absolutely right. This new video posted by the outlet Page 6, allegedly showing that arrest. Now, we heard from DA Nathan Hochman today that Nick Reiner was arrested without incident. Now, they say this shows Nick Reiner surrendering to police. You see him throwing his hands up at a crosswalk at a metro station in downtown LA. This is about 15 miles away from his mother and father's Brentwood home in Los Angeles, where those stabbings took place. Now, we know that he was arrested near the Exposition Park area, obviously in a public area near the University of Southern California. And Vinny, upon talking to some people here in Los Angeles today, just some people on the sidewalk, they say that area is a heavily drug-influenced area as well, methamphetamine, heroin, things of that nature. But that video, again, posted by the outlet Page 6, showing Nick Reiner throwing his hands up and being arrested by LAPD.
All right, let's talk about the big press conference that took place. What did the DA say about this case?
Well, the most important thing, Vinny, he says official charges will be filed and that the death penalty is still on the table. They have not made a decision about it yet, but it's on the table as far as this case progressing. Now, District Attorney Nathan Hochman says prosecutors will file 2 first-degree murder charges against Nick Reiner, which he says are upgraded to special circumstances due to there being multiple murders involved in this case. Now, he explained the charges, why they may seek the death penalty, and how the case may play out. Take a listen to this.
Today, I'm here to announce that our office will be filing charges against Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michele Singer Reiner. These charges will be 2 counts of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of multiple murders. He also faces a special allegation that he personally used a dangerous and deadly weapon, that being a knife. These charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. No decision at this point has been made with respect to the death penalty. Announcing these charges, I also want to announce that they're just that. They are charges. Charges are not evidence. Evidence is something that we will be presenting in a court of law to meet the standard of proof we meet in every criminal case, which is beyond a reasonable doubt, to 12 jurors who you'll unanimously have to find that we've met that standard to prove the charges we bring to court. Right now, with respect to the process, once the charges get filed this afternoon, Nick Reiner will be then brought to court. He is going through medical clearance, something that everybody who gets arrested and gets held in a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department jail goes through. Once he is medically cleared, he will be brought to court to be arraigned on these charges. At that point, he will enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. Now, prosecuting these cases involving family members are some of the most challenging and most heart-wrenching cases that this office faces because of the intimate and often brutal nature of the crimes involved. Rob Reiner was a brilliant actor and director, an iconic force in our entertainment industry for decades. His wife, Michele Reiner, was an equally iconic photographer and producer. Their loss is beyond tragic, and we will commit ourselves to bringing their murderer to justice. You will hear in the media rumors. You will hear speculation. You will hear hearsay. What I'm asking everyone to do is to rely on trusted sources. If it doesn't come from the district attorney's office, from LAPD, from the coroner's office, or from the courtroom itself, then there's a good chance you are hearing misinformation. Because at the appropriate time, the actual evidence involved in this case will be presented in a court of law. So I ask for your patience until that is done.
Now, Vinnie, the DA and LAPD declined to answer many of the comments or the questions from media today due to this being a thorough, ongoing investigation, but they did comment on some of the aspects of the investigation and the arrest of Nick Reiner itself. Take a listen to this.
He was found with good, solid police work, investigative tools used by robbery, homicide, and gang and narcotic division detectives with the U.S. Marshal Service Task Force involved as well. So we're thankful for the work that was done. I won't go into talking about what was found or anything that could potentially taint the investigation.
Specifically, he was arrested in a public area, in the Exposition Park area near the University of Southern California campus. He was approached by the officers, and he was arrested without incident. There were no indications that there was no indication that he was going to resist or anything like that. He didn't flee or anything like that. He was taken into custody without issue, and he was transported to our police headquarters facility.
Any evidence, if there is any, of mental illness for his background will be coming out in the hearings that will occur. We anticipate, again, after the arraignment, the process will go through the normal process a case like this goes through. At the appropriate time, if there is evidence of mental illness, it will be presented in court and in whatever detail the defense seeks to do that.
Now, Vinnie, we are still waiting on Nick Reiner's medical clearance for him to make his first court appearance, and we are still waiting on the autopsy report of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele. Now, the DA also did not comment on the timeline or anything specific like that regarding the murders, and he also didn't comment on where they were actually found within the Brentwood residence.
All right, Cody's going to be with us all hour. And obviously, they know a lot more than they said today, and that brings us to the first question in our investigation. What don't we know about what happened? Let's bring in our guests who are going to help us through all this. Joining us, retired homicide detective, host of the YouTube true crime show Murder Mind, Vince Velasquez is with us, and celebrity attorney Chris Melcher out there in L.A. Great to see you both. All right, Vince, you're looking at this. Homicide investigators like you obviously have been on this case. What are some of the things that we don't know right now about what happened that you may suspect that they know about what happened?
Well, I think what LAPD homicide is doing right now is a full timeline. That's so important, starting with what the victims were doing from the moment they woke up that day, but more importantly, what Nick Reiner was doing from the moment he woke up that day, all the way to the party. And that's going to include the Hollywood's who's who of witness list. They're going to have to interview all those folks. Digital evidence, app activity, geofencing, where Nick Reiner was, and then the full forensic story, exactly what happened inside that house. And then lastly, motive. Like, was this substance abuse? Was it a mental health breakdown? Or could it have been something else that we just don't know about?
Yeah, Chris Melcher, from your perspective, what don't we know about what happened here that you think is going to be significant as all this plays out?
What we don't know about is, was there any planning involved? Is this something, an act of rage that happened? Was he suffering from some kind of mental disorder that prevented him from really having the capacity to form intent? This is what I imagine, is of keen interest to the defense, because if it's clear that he committed the crime, the question then is, okay, could he get out on a not guilty by reason of insanity? And I think that that's where the focus of the defense is going to be, but also the investigators are going to be looking for evidence maybe to contradict an NGI plea.
And Vince, this arrest is quick. Like, this is a fast arrest in all of this. So what does that tell you about some of the evidence that they may have found, or statements or things that they've learned?
Well, what I've read is that, these victims, the daughter actually found them and told LAPD that her brother was a prime suspect from the beginning. So they kind of knew who they were kind of looking for as a prime suspect. And through, cell phone tracing and things like that, it wouldn't be that hard to track him down. And it's interesting, like, of course, they just took him into custody. They didn't really charge him right away. But what's really interesting, I would love to, in the future, we're going to hear about what that interview was like, if he chose to talk to them and what he said to the LAPD. That could lend to motive and exactly what was going on in his state of mind. Now, if they found him in an area that was, frequented with people that use drugs, one of the things that I would have done as a detective investigating this is get a warrant and test his blood. Even though it's hours later, it still is evidence that, could shed some light on his mental state.
Yeah. And Chris, how about the events of that day? What are you most interested in and believe will reveal much more about what happened here in terms of things that happened during the course of the day?
Well, Vinny, what I would like to see is messages that Nick sent to either his parents or family members before the incident, and then any messages that he sent afterwards. To me, this is pivotal, because if he is expressing anything in these messages before the crimes were committed about planning and threats, then that would indicate that he understood what he was doing. And then messages that happened afterwards that might indicate that he understood that this was wrong. And the reason why I'm focusing on that is because if he goes with a not guilty by reason of insanity, he not only has to show that he had a mental disorder, but that he did not understand the nature and quality of the act, or that it was legally and morally wrong. So to me, it's all about these messages that may have been sent.
And Vince, for the detectives that are working the case, and this is obviously incredibly high profile, is there more pressure you feel? Does more pressure come from the folks upstairs? How does it work when you're working a case like this one?
Extreme pressure. I mean, let's just look back at the OJ case from 1994, 1995. I mean, LAPD made so many mistakes forensically. And I think, historically, they've learned that this case is going to be a media frenzy. And LAPD knows that. Anytime a detective or a department has a case like this, they have to cross those T's and dot those I's, even if it doesn't need it. It's one of those things where you go 18 extra steps that you typically may not have done because it's going to have so much scrutiny on it. I guarantee you it's going to be some high-priced, some very well-known defense attorney that's going to pick or try to pick this case apart. So LAPD, I would imagine at this point, is really taking their time. They've got a very, very robust group of seasoned detectives. And I really think that they're taking their time with this thing. They've already charged him. They've already charged Nick Reiner with the crime. So it's not who did it. Now they have to prove it. And now is the time when you really have to slow down and make sure you're doing everything correctly.
All right. Our guests are going to stick around. Coming up next, what will Nick Reiner's defense focus on?
The Court TV Podcast will return.
It's with deep sadness that I address the tragic loss of Robert and Michele Reiner. Today, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office has formally filed charges against Mr. Reiner for the murder of his parents. This case is heartbreaking and deeply personal, not only for the Reiner family and their loved ones, but for our entire city.
Yeah, there aren't many who are bigger in Hollywood or were bigger in Hollywood than Rob Reiner. I mean, the legendary movies. His career took off with a legendary role in one of the biggest sitcoms of all time. And from there, it was just bigger and bigger and bigger. And then his political activism kept him in the headlines even when he wasn't making movies. So everyone feeling it out in Hollywood. Let's get back to Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who is in L.A. tonight. In front of the courthouse. So let's talk about court. What happened in court today out there in L.A.?
Well, Vinny, nothing happened at all because that scheduled arraignment that we thought was going to happen this morning got pushed. And that's because Nick Reiner's defense attorney says that he was not medically cleared and suitable enough to be in court. Now, who is that defense attorney? None other than high-profile defense attorney, L.A.-based Alan Jackson. Of course, Alan Jackson representing Harvey Weinstein, defendants like Kevin Spacey, and for our viewers here at Court TV, Karen Reed during the Karen Reed murder trial and retrial that we aired right here on the program. And I actually saw Alan Jackson today in the courthouse looking very unassuming for a few minutes. He spoke with media outside the courthouse just after what was supposed to be that arraignment hearing. Here's the video that TMZ posted.
Every inmate has to be medically cleared before they can be transported to court. He has not been medically cleared. It's just a procedural issue.
Have you spoken to your client at all?
I'm not commenting any further than what the procedure of the court today is.
Can we expect a hearing tomorrow?
We'll be back day to day. The bailiff has indicated that the sheriff's department will take it on a day-by-day basis, and so hopefully he'll be cleared tomorrow, and we can get him there.
Now, Vinny, important to note, Alan Jackson did not specify how he became associated with the case or who exactly is paying his high-profile legal fees either.
Yeah, great point, Cody. And also a little different than what we saw in Dedham, where he's proclaiming his client's innocence on the courthouse steps. This was a little bit different. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What will Nick Reiner's defense focus on? Where is Alan Jackson taking this case? What's it going to be about? Joining me, East Coast contributor for Los Angeles Magazine, Lauren Conlon is with us, and still with us, celebrity lawyer Chris Melcher. Chris, first question to you about the hiring. So if he was arrested and charged with murdering someone and his father was still alive, I'd be like, okay, yeah, his dad made the call, his dad is paying for it. What do you suspect? How did this happen? That he's got the highest profile criminal defense attorney in the country representing him?
Well, Vinny, it doesn't make a lot of sense because even if a trust had been established for Nick's benefit by his parents, I would imagine there would be a lot of restrictions on any distributions from that trust because of the chronic drug problems that he's had. So I don't imagine that he would have much of any money available to him. And he certainly can't inherit from his parents if he's killed them. So I got to think that Alan's involvement here very quickly, maybe based on just wanting to be attached to such a high profile case and maybe trying to work out the finances later. You know, there's some lawyers who will do that because there isn't really a clear source to be able to afford such a high power defense.
Yeah. All right, Lauren Conlon, your reaction when you heard that Karen Reed's attorney, and we remember how all that went down, ends up taking this case, and how much of a game changer do you think it is based upon Alan Jackson's history and the way he, you know, interacts with the media and how his cases end up playing out?
I thought this was huge, Vinny. I was not expecting Alan Jackson to step in. I mean, as you said, I was wondering about the payment, but I guess if he uses a credit card, I mean, it's not really on Alan if the credit card isn't paid, right? But no, I think that Alan Jackson is absolutely going to focus on police missteps. I think that he is going to pick apart every little thing that the LAPD does. And I think that, you know, as Vince said, there have been some very high-profile cases like OJ that the LAPD has not done their best on. And so if you remember on Sunday when the news first broke, LAPD made sure to tell all of us that they had to wait to enter the house and search the entire house. They had to wait for the search warrant. And they also said that this search of the entire house is imperative to their investigation. So I think that, you know, of course, the mental illness may come into play. The fact that, you know, he fled the scene after he did it, that kind of tells me he might not be as crazy as we all think. There's some other reports saying that, you know, he did appear to be somewhat normal when a house guest was staying with the Reiners. Who knows? We don't know what's going on inside, you know, anyone's head. But again, back to your original question, I think Alan Jackson's just going to pick apart what the police did or didn't do and go from there.
Chris, your thoughts about the focus of the defense?
Well, I think Lauren's absolutely right and raises a great point that if he was having a mental episode and didn't understand the nature and quality of his act and didn't know if it was right or wrong, why would he leave? Why wouldn't he just stay there? So Lauren makes a great point there. I think certainly the first focus would be, hey, maybe we got the wrong guy. Nick wasn't there. How could he do this? So certainly if there's any plausible basis to deny that Nick was involved, then that's going to be the first thing the defense is going to do. However, if it looks like there's overwhelming evidence and there's no real way of getting out of that, that he did it, then the focus would be on not guilty by reason of insanity, because instead of doing life without possibility of parole or maybe even the death penalty, if it's NGI, we're talking commitment to a mental hospital.
All right, Chris Melcher, always great to have you on the program. Great to see you. Lauren Collins going to stick around. Still to come, how toxic was the atmosphere inside the home?
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the murders of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele, a Hollywood icon murdered in his own house, and prosecutors say it was his own son who did it. Here's the story. He spent a lifetime creating stories. Rob Reiner brought joy, laughter, and heart to screens across the world. He was a husband, a father, a beloved filmmaker whose influence spanned generations. But even the brightest life can cast dark shadows. In December of 2025, at the Reiner family home in Brentwood, Los Angeles, a heated argument spiraled into horror. By morning, Rob and his wife, Michele, were gone, murdered in an act that stunned Hollywood and the world. Their son, Nick, has been arrested, and questions remain about what led to this unthinkable crime. What was going on in that home and in that family in the final moments before tragedy struck? So much of this story, this case, this investigation, and ultimately this trial will be about family dynamics. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who's live outside LA Superior Court tonight. What are we hearing? Because we've been hearing a lot of talk about Conan O'Brien's Christmas party that was that day. What are we hearing about what may have happened at that Christmas party?
Well, Vinny, there have been multiple reports of odd behavior by Nick Reiner and an argument that Nick had with his father, Rob, at this party at Conan O'Brien's Los Angeles home, where Rob's wife, Michele, was also in attendance. Now, celebrity journalist Perez Hilton joined closing arguments here on the network, talking about Nick Reiner's erratic behavior at this party. Take a listen.
We have heard that Nick Reiner was going around acting erratically, asking people at Conan O'Brien's party, "Are you famous? Are you famous?" So one can only speculate, was he in a state of drug-induced psychosis, or was he just high, or was he unwell? We don't know. And my guess as a parent is Rob was probably just telling his son, "You should leave. You're not well. You're embarrassing me." maybe they blew up because of, you're embarrassing me. A son doesn't want to hear that, if that's what happened. But I'm sure that some people at that party will now be talking to authorities just as they gather more information.
And Vinnie, TMZ also reported on what happened at this party as well. They say, quote, at the party, Rob and Nick got into a very loud argument, loud enough for many others to hear, Reiner family sources tell TMZ. We're told Rob and Michele then left the party. We do not know if Nick left as well. Our family sources add Michele had been anguishing to friends over the last few months that she and Rob were at their wits' end over Nick's mental illness and alleged substance abuse issues and did not know what to do with their son Nick, saying, we've tried everything. And Vinnie, also NBC News reported on this behavior as well. They say, quote, Nick Reiner is alleged to have interrupted a conversation involving comedian Bill Hader. When Hader told him the conversation was private, the sources said Nick Reiner appeared to stand still and stare before, quote, storming off. And Vinnie, also NBC News reports someone there believes Rob and Michele were embarrassed by Nick's odd behavior at this high-profile Hollywood party.
And what do we know about Nick Reiner's history?
Well, Vinnie, we do know he's been very vocal about his early struggles in his early teen years with substance abuse, drug addiction, and even homelessness, again, starting as early as the age of 15. Now, Vinnie, back in 2016, Rob Reiner and his son Nick Reiner did an interview for the AOL Build series, where they discussed the film Being Charlie, which Nick Reiner also co-wrote alongside his father. The film was released in 2015 and was loosely based on Nick Reiner's battle with addiction and the family dynamics surrounding recovery. Here's a piece of that interview.
I wasn't really that shy about including some of the bad stuff I did, because a lot of people do things that are pretty unsavory when they're going through that. But in terms of making it a narrative, of course, it's not my life, but it needs to be constructed into a story.
The fact that we were dealing with, things that Nick had gone through and how I had related to it and how his mother had related to it, it forced me to have to see more clearly and understand more deeply what Nick had gone through.
And Vinnie, Perez Hilton also talked about the relationship between the family and what the family was up to leading up to Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. Take a listen to this.
Rob openly spoke about the difficult relationship that he had with his son and regrets that he had. In fact, during promo for that movie that his son wrote the screenplay for and that he directed, he expressed regret over listening to experts. Nick Reiner, by the time he was 19, had already spent multiple stays in rehab, and that pattern continued throughout the years. He struggled with addiction so much that there were periods of his life that he was homeless because his parents gave him tough love. Nick did not like that his parents were not coddling him. They were supporting him, but they were demanding repeatedly that he go to rehab and that they trust the experts there. So this dynamic of their son being an addict and struggle with his father is something that they both talked about publicly before. And obviously the family knows a lot more than the public does. Tracy Reiner said that prior to this now infamous party at Conan O'Brien's house, where Rob and Michele and their son Nick were at, and they got into a fight, that the family was all together at a family gathering. So Saturday was a day for the Reiners to be together. And as of now, we, the public, can only presume what happened at that family gathering. But I just keep going back, especially to Rob's 28-year-old daughter and Michelle's 28-year-old daughter, Romy, who was the one who discovered her parents in this horrific state. She's the one who called police. And on that 911 call, she told authorities that her brother, who's 32, had been staying at home and was violent. That is, according to reports, what Romy told the 911 dispatcher, that her brother was violent.
So, Vinnie, as this case and investigation continues to unfold, as we continue to learn more, it's becoming increasingly evident that Nick Reiner had quite a struggling early life that may or may not have led to this brutal behavior.
All right. Cody. We'll get back to you in a second. Really a tough position that the Reiners are in with their son. That brings us to the next question in our investigation. How toxic was the atmosphere inside the home? 32 years old, he's back living at home. Let's bring in our guest. Still with us, East Coast contributor for Los Angeles Magazine, Lauren Conlin. And joining me, celebrity psychologist, Dr. Jeffrey Gardier. Dr. Jeffrey Gardier, great to see you. It's been some time. Great to catch up.
Yes.
Let me start with you. A couple words that I heard here, quoted from the Reiners. We're at our wits' end with him. He's 32. He's back in the house. Yes, it's a big house, but it's their home. What are your thoughts about what was happening, the dynamic in there, and what impact it may have had on what happened here?
Well, with working with my patients, Vinnie, I often see this. A young person struggling with mental illness, struggling with substance abuse. Because of the stigma that goes along with that, they don't stay within their treatment, and therefore there is this push and pull with the parents, so it becomes a very toxic environment. And what we typically see is that there becomes this real divide where the parents are insisting that that young person clean up their act. The young person is having those mental health issues. It's being exacerbated by the drugs. And it turns out to be a situation of where there is constant infighting within the home. People love one another in these homes, but they just do not see eye to eye. And quite often it does end up in some sort of emotional and, in this case, perhaps physical violence.
Lauren Conlin, your thoughts about what was happening inside this sprawling mansion, which is the home of the Reiners for the family.
Yes, Vinnie, it's interesting because, as I mentioned before, there was an article that came out in the New York Post about a friend of the Reiners who was a house guest not even 2 weeks ago. And he actually said that it was a very pleasant environment. He said, you know, Nick would eat dinner with the family. They'd be watching sports games, cheering, etc. But you know, we all know that, again, looks can be deceiving, and the Reiners had issues, you know, with their adult son stemming back to when he was a teenager. And going back to that interview that Rob and Nick did, you know, Rob had also said that, you know, he possibly didn't react the right way when he found Nick on drugs when he was 15, but he did the best that he could. All parents do the best they can. And Nick himself has also admitted to being violent at times. I think a 2018 podcast interview resurfaced where he actually said that he was staying in the guest house and he had some kind of episode where he destroyed everything, including shattering a huge TV. So, you know, it's clear things haven't been great. But again, I always say, you know, we're not there. We don't see everything.
Yeah. Dr. Gardier, let me ask you, I'm interested in your thoughts about how this plays out in a courtroom. We're talking about mental illness.
Yeah, I think what Alan Jackson is going to do is something very close to what Chris Melcher mentioned earlier, and that is that if it is something where they just can't get him off, Nick Reiner, from actually doing this, and he is the person, I think they're going to look at whether there is mental health and capacity issue. So does he have an organic mental illness, that substance abuse was a self-medication? Or was substance abuse exacerbating an organic mental illness? Or finally, was there a longstanding addiction or withdrawal effects potentially impacting the judgment or perception when this horrific crime happened, if it was him? It's not enough for an insanity plea, I don't believe, but it's enough for mitigating circumstances to avoid a death penalty or life in prison.
Dr. Gardier, because you're with us, and there's probably many people at home who could be going through something similar, you know, parents with a child and they don't know what to do. They're at their wits' end. If you could, and I know it's only 45 seconds or so, give us some things that they should think about doing starting right now.
First and foremost, they should understand that whatever's going on with the substance abuse is most likely tied to a mental illness. So it can become very easy to just blame the victim for having all the issues in the family. But everyone in the family should take responsibility as to what is going on with this individual. And the parents who are dealing with a child with mental illness, well, they should join a support group, because it's the hardest thing that one can do to try to get their child off of drugs.
Lauren Conlin, something else that Cody was talking about was this Christmas party at Conan O'Brien's, and it just seems like this becomes a big part of the investigation. I mean, if there's enough that people are already talking about having seen something in public, it seems everyone at that party is a potential witness, and these are high-end, like, super A-listers that are at this party.
Yes. Earlier today, Vinny, there was a couple photos that surfaced of Bill Hader, and he looked tense on the phone. Normally, I see these headlines and I'm like, oh, they're exaggerated. But no, Bill Hader looked very tense. And reportedly, Bill Hader had an exchange with Nick Reiner, kind of telling him that he was in the middle of this private conversation and he wanted, Nick to maybe not be there at the moment, and Nick didn't take that very well. So I think Bill Hader could possibly be, at the top of that witness list.
All right, big thank you to our guests, Lauren Conlin. Always great to have you here, Dr. Jeffrey Gardere. It really is great to see you, and thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Great to see you, old friend.
All right,
thank you.
Coming up next, what do the crime scenes reveal?
This is the Court TV Podcast.
Given how this atrocity was committed and the violent manner in which Rob and Michele, according to reports, died with their throats slit, I'm sure there will be a lot of DNA evidence.
Oh, yeah.
And my guess is he might just plead guilty without a trial,
Unbelievable. Incredible violence, and it seems like it's, according to investigators and prosecutors, it's Rob and Michele Reiner's own son who was the one who was responsible. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas out in L.A. Let's talk about the crime scenes here. What do we know about the crime scenes?
Vinny, we know there are actually two crime scenes. One, of course, at the Brentwood home where the stabbings took place and where Rob and his wife Michele were found. And also, according to the New York Post, another crime scene at a Santa Monica hotel. But let's start with the home where the bodies were found. Of course, in the Brentwood neighborhood here in Los Angeles, where the bodies were found by the Reiner's daughter, Romy. The fire department alerted police once they arrived and saw the two bodies, which, of course, prompted the death investigation. Those bodies, of course, were identified as Rob and Michele. They had severe stab wounds. The DA, of course, says a knife was used, but during that press conference, they did not specify whether they found an actual murder weapon, found the actual knife. It was also not specified where in the house that the two bodies were found. Now, moving on to that hotel room, Vinny, in Santa Monica, according to the New York Post, Nick Reiner checked into a Santa Monica hotel around 4 a.m. Sunday, December 14th, following the stabbings. And once police arrived, they found the hotel room with blood throughout the bathroom. They even say bed sheets were covering the window. So, Vinny, two very, very crucial crime scenes in this case. I'm sure a lot of evidence from both of those crime scenes will be presented in hearings to come. And, of course, if this eventually goes to trial, we'll hear a bunch of evidence from these two crime scenes when that day comes as well.
All right, Cody Thomas in L.A. for us. Great job tonight. Thanks so much. And that brings us to our final question of the hour, and it is, what do the crime scenes reveal, or what would you expect them to reveal? Still with me, retired homicide detective, host of the YouTube true crime show, The Murder Mind, Vince Velasquez, and also joining us, entertainment journalist Candace Cruz. All right, Vince, you've got two different scenes here. What would you expect to find in the home, and then what would you expect to find in the hotel that he allegedly went to afterwards?
So I've read some reports that they found blood inside the hotel. And what's interesting is a knife attack, typically, especially when it's like a intimate domestic murder, it's vicious. It's so vicious. And I wonder, did Nick Reiner actually cut himself? So the question would be, in the hotel room, is the blood the victim's blood? Is it Nick Reiner's blood if he cut himself? Is it a mixture of blood? And I would imagine LAPD is running through that hotel room with a fine-tooth comb. Inside the residence where the bodies were found, obviously, is there a murder weapon in there? And then, of course, just where are the bodies located? It's very difficult to kill two people and contain two people immediately with a knife. Typically, with a handgun, it's easier, but with a knife, sometimes one person has a chance to get away. So to incapacitate two people with a knife in a short period of time is very, very unusual. So I think some more information is going to be coming out about that.
Yeah, and Candace, your thoughts here. It seems like the home, the crime scene, is this sprawling mansion, and it's gonna, it should reveal a story here about what was happening inside this family.
Absolutely. I mean, we obviously know that there were heightened events leading up to the deaths, and so I think we have reports, and I've seen reports that they were found in bed. Obviously, those haven't been confirmed yet, and just like he just said, in order to incapacitate two individuals in a short amount of time with a knife, it had to have been in a closed space. But with it being so sprawling, I can only imagine what Romy walked in upon trying to find her parents, especially after the massage therapist reached out to her to come and find the parents. So I think more time will tell, especially with it being such a large space, of how this really unfolded. We don't know anything more outside of the contained area of what we've seen with reports so far. So I am interested to see how this unfolds, if it was a little bit more of a fight or if it was just one of those moments like we're assuming with the bed.
Yeah, Vince, how important would the murder weapon itself be to locking this up and really, putting it over the top in terms of the evidence?
Well, I mean, the murder weapon would be extremely important, especially if Rob Reiner's fingerprints are on it. Now, he has been a guest in the family home. A defense attorney is going to argue that he may have touched that knife at some point earlier, but nevertheless, that's evidence that a jury needs to hear. So that's extremely important. And the amount of blood that I would imagine to incapacitate two people in a small space is going to be a vicious. I think we have just scratched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the viciousness of this crime. And when the evidence comes out, it's going to be horrific. And I want to say that Lauren Conlon brought up a good point earlier, that the defense is going to attack the police procedures on this case. They're going to run a playbook straight out of the OJ case and look at this thing with a fine-tooth comb under a microscope and really, really tune in to anything, any tiny mistake that LAPD may make, and try to make them look incompetent and bring some doubt into this case.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time for tonight, but the conversation will continue. Candace Cruz, great to see you. Vince Velasquez, always a pleasure. We appreciate it. Clearly, there are a lot of layers in understanding how a son born into power, prestige, and privilege could end up accused of killing the very people who gave him everything. On its surface, it seems like a whole lot of selfishness. A child growing up with everything and expecting even more. But now we'll have to see what questions his defense raises about what happened. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.